Greetings, and thank you for joining the Capstone Group for this important Zoom event. Before we get to our main presentation, a bit about the Capstone Group. We were founded in August of 2018, inspired by the Howard University student protests that took place earlier that year. We are a dynamic collaborative of Howard University alumni, faculty, students, staff, and community that proactively address issues relevant to the Howard University community. We provide an empowering platform to exchange ideas and experiences to affect positive change. Now, sit back and enjoy the presentation, and remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening, and I'll start with our first guest speaker this evening is Mr. Gary Murray. Gary Murray is a fifth-generation Washingtonian. He's a member of the 2022 graduating class of the renowned Paul Laurence Dunbar Senior High School in the district, and he's also an honor roll student. He's a fierce advocate for his community and peers and explores ways to collaborate with others and to make positive change for youth and other marginalized members of society. He served as a Student Advisory Council representative for the DC State Board of Elections, SBOE. He was selected to become the first District of Columbia delegate as a member of the 60th class of the United States Senate Youth Program. He was recently awarded with a 4-year full-ride Bonner Scholarship to attend the university of his choice, which we hope will be Howard University. He will attend, oh no, he's gonna attend Allegheny College. I knew that already, but where he will major in history and public policy. His career aspiration is to become a constitutional lawyer and rise to the bench as a judge. It's not too late for Howard. Our next guest is Miss Erica England, who is no stranger to the Capstone Group. She is a recent graduate of Howard University, May 2022. Woo-hoo, congratulations. She has with a degree in political science. She's a native of Raleigh, North Carolina. However, her family are West African immigrants from Sierra Leone. She works as a national, digital, and distributed organizer for Unemployed Workers United, focusing on Black, Brown, and immigrant communities. She began a political journey as a student activist and advocate at Howard University and was one of the leaders of the recent student protests of the Blackburn takeover. She interned for the progressive nonprofit Our Revolution and became a student ambassador for DC statehood in the fight for equal voting rights in the District of Columbia. She joined the Bernie Sanders 2020 presidential campaign in 2019 as the operations manager for the national office. She also helped start an active Young Democratic Socialist Association Afro-Socialist chapter at Howard University. And she has a passion for helping people recognize the power they hold to improve their lives and those around them. Thank you, Erica. And next up it's my pleasure to introduce Gregory Mundy. He is a native of Los Angeles, California, but a graduate of Howard University in zoology. He's a senior clinical project manager in Karyopharm Therapeutics Incorporated. He's held positions in the biotech, pharmaceutical, medical device, and organ tissue transplant fields for more than 28 years. He brought the first corneal implant for the correction of myopia, nearsightedness, to the market. He's CEO and founder of Rosemary's Pralines, a small business that he founded more than a decade ago in memory of his mother, Rosemary Mundy. He's an active member of the Providence community, supporting several charitable organizations and Democratic candidates, both locally and at the national level. He's married to Dr. Phyllis Dennery, the chair of pediatrics at the Warren Alpert School of Medicine at Brown University. They have 2 adult children, Miles and Ariana Mundy. And last but not least, we have someone who is no stranger to Capstone, Reverend Wendy Hamilton. Now, it's been almost a year ago to the day that Reverend Hamilton gave a seminar to us in May of 2021, May 24th, actually. So we're glad to have her back. Reverend Wendy Hamilton is an ordained minister, social justice advocate, and mother of one, originally from Portsmouth, Ohio. Her bachelor's degree is in human development, and she received that in 1991 at Howard University, and a master's degree in religious studies, also at Howard University School of Divinity in 2006. She credits her educational experiences and single motherhood as being two of the most transformative events of her life. She's an adjunct professor of communications at the University of Phoenix and the Community College of Baltimore County. She's executive assistant to Benjamin Jealous, who is the former president and CEO of the NAACP at the headquarters in Baltimore. And she's participated in initiatives on criminal justice reform, civil engagement, economic inequality, and environmental justice. Her passions are education, human services, for nonprofit advocacy, communications, and chaplaincy. She served as a part-time pastor of Open Door Metropolitan Community Church in Germantown, Maryland. And she's also served as director of spiritual and cultural outreach for the 2020 presidential candidate, Andrew Yang. And she is currently running as a delegate for Congress for DC for 2022. Outstanding. So we have an outstanding slate of speakers for you this evening, and it's my pleasure to turn it over to the moderator so that we can get started. Claudette.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you again. My energy this evening is about knowledge, sharing with our community actionable steps that we can take to create the results that we desire and to become the change agents that we are interested in facilitating. We can't wait for anybody to save us. We have to move on. And in the Maasai culture, there is a term, Kasera Inegra. How are the children? And that's a critical question.
Among the most accomplished and fabled tribes of Africa, no tribe was considered to have warriors more fearsome or more intelligent than the mighty Maasai. It is perhaps surprising then to learn the traditional greeting that passed between Maasai warriors, and how are the children? It is still the traditional greeting among the Maasai, acknowledging the high value that the Maasai always place on their children's well-being. Even warriors with no children of their own would always give the traditional answer, all the children are well. Meaning, of course, that peace and safety prevail, that the priorities of protecting the young are in place, that Maasai society has not forgotten its reason for being, its proper functions and responsibilities. All the children are well means that life is good. It means that the daily struggles for existence do not preclude proper caring for their young. I wonder how it might affect our consciousness of our own children's welfare if in our culture we took to greeting each other with this daily question, and how are the children? I wonder if we heard that question and passed it along to each other a dozen times a day, if it would begin to make a difference in the reality of how the children are thought of or cared about in our own country. I wonder if every adult among us, parent and non-parent alike, felt an equal weight for the daily care and protection of all children in our communities, in our towns, in our states, and in our country. And I wonder if we could truly say without hesitation, the children are well. Yes, all the children are well.
Indeed, how are the children? Are the children well? That's the concern that we have, especially with the political winds that are prevailing in our communities these days. From the baby formula to shopping in grocery stores to rights and privileges that have been earned, sacrificed, and the upheaval that we're experiencing in society in every aspect is creating for us very difficult times indeed. And at this point, we would like to engage the panel members to speak to us about the breaking news, using our voice as well as leveraging on our vote. I'd like to first call out Dr. Reverend Wendy Hamilton, because Wendy was the inspiration for this conversation this evening. The night that it broke, that the Roe v. Wade was possibly about to be overturned, Wendy was one of the first people on the scene and the grounds of the Supreme Court, using her voice to leverage the concerns about the community and what this impact would have, like a pond with a pebble rippling through it. What are the waves? So Wendy, I'd like to offer you the first at the mic this evening to talk about the concerns that you have about how are the children and how are these changes impacting our community. Thank you, Wendy.
Well, thank you so much for that gracious invitation. Thank you, Capstone Group, for having me back. I appreciate it. Anytime my Howard family calls with an invitation, I'm dropping everything to be there, because I wouldn't be here if Howard wasn't there. So I'm very grateful, as always, to be home with my family. Now, when you start off saying something like, how are the children? If we're going to be honest, we have to say the kids are not all right. But they're not all right because we're not all right, because our country is not all right, because our culture is not all right. And so we have to be honest and begin to have some very difficult, but also mobilizing conversations very quickly, because the winds of change, and change that is not necessarily that's going to be positive, are right at our backs. You speak about the Roe v. Wade overturned decision. Now listen, as was mentioned, I am running for Congress. And so here in DC, my mind goes to what's happening and how our decisions also going to impact DC specifically, as well as the country. So the particular night that the leak came out, I had just gotten home from a day full of work, because I still work full-time and am running a campaign, but that's another call. But I came home after an event, thought I was going to relax, took off my shoes and perused, opened up, social media, and saw that Roe v. Wade to be overturned was trending. I said, oh no, I put my shoes back on. And I said, oh no, we're not doing that. And I went back over to the Supreme Court. Now, one of the things that's good about living in DC is you have the access, we have the opportunity to do something like that. So I didn't even know at that time what I was going to do. I just knew I had to go say something, because that, to me, that leak just spoke to the potential for so much that could happen if it was allowed to go forward. I knew this was bigger than just Roe v. Wade. They were endeavoring to do something behind closed doors, in the dark, that ultimately got brought to light. Because what we found out was that decision, that draft, was written in February. Here we are in April, and we're just now finding out about it. When were they going to share that it was even coming up in a conversation? So I get over there to the Supreme Court. By that time, this was fairly early. So it's probably about 10:30 at night. And I'm saying fairly early into that night after the decision. There were about 50 or so of us over there. We were literally walking around like we were just kind of in shock, like zombies. We didn't really know. I didn't know, like I said, what I wanted to say, what I was going to say. I just knew I wanted to be with like-minded people who felt this sense of assault that was coming our direction. And sure enough, as more people began to come out there, and even some of those who were in support of what the leak is endeavoring to do showed up, and some conversations ensued, particularly with some of the younger people that were out there. And so I found myself endeavoring to defend them from being attacked by some conservative press and things that were there. And next thing I know, people were asking me to talk about what it was that had me so passionate that night. I said, you don't understand. This is more, Roe v. Wade is important and essential, yes, but this sets a precedent. If they overturn this, they're not going to stop. They're going to go to interracial marriage. They're going to go to marriage equality. And for us in the District of Columbia without statehood, this is going to be even more dangerous for us than it is for some of the other states in this country. We don't have the buffer of a state legislature to protect us from anything that they would decide to do if this were to go come to fruition. And we can't afford that here in DC. So, like, for instance, if Roe v. Wade is overturned, and I just got a call, a press inquiry today asking me, Reverend Hamilton, can you be on standby because they might make the decision this week. So y'all might see me back out there again this week. I'm just saying. But they said to me, what should it matter if they overturn Roe v. Wade? Let's just say they overturn it, and then we somehow get a Republican Congress in DC or in the country this next election. Republicans take over Congress. They can outright ban Roe v. Wade in DC, and we have no recourse. And then if they decide, okay, well, you know what, Roe v. Wade's not far enough. Let us, overturn, like I said, interracial marriage, loving, any of those things. We are not protected as DC. When the first leak was made, states like California, spoke up that night. They said, oh no, we're going to codify Roe. We're going to make sure that abortion rights are protected in California. So even if they do decide to overturn it, California is going to be all right. Illinois is going to be all right. Some of the more blue states, they're going to protect their women in their states. They're going to be all right. We're not going to be all right. And we're not going to have any pushback. This is why they have resisted giving DC statehood in the first place. They act like we can't make our own decisions for ourselves, and because we're majority brown, black, and that's not okay. And so I was down there saying, look, I don't know where the rest of y'all are. I need all my DC lit. We need to be on the front lines, using our voices, using whatever that we can to speak up on behalf of our city, of our residents, of our women, and thereby the nation, because they cannot be allowed to get away with what they are endeavoring to do. It's in plain sight now. We know it was revealed for a reason. What we gonna do about it? And I'm ready, whatever it is.
All right, Greg, what are your thoughts? How would you like to jump in on this situation, Roe v. Wade? Your wife's a physician. She treats neonatologists. You work in healthcare. You see the inequities and the disparities in our community. Can you share with us what your thoughts are about this particular piece of legislation and the ramifications of what repealing Roe v. Wade means in your mind?
Sure. And thank you, Reverend Hamilton and Gary and Erica. Thank you, all the panelists, for joining. And again, I appreciate being invited to speak on behalf of the Capstone Group. I have to say I felt the same way as Reverend Hamilton did. I felt like some major injustice had been done. Just the fact that it was leaked, but the fact that they were even considering overturning Roe versus Wade is unnerving. This is just a start, and Reverend Hamilton pointed out, it is just the start, because they are not, we've seen what the Republicans are capable of. We saw what happened on January 6th. We've seen what's happened around, all these activities behind the scenes that are slowly coming to light. They are capable. At this point, there's nothing I put past the Republican Party, nothing. And that includes, looking at, like she mentioned, the Lovey case, interracial marriage, same-sex marriage. Again, I do not put anything past. So the 14th Amendment, I do not put anything past them at this stage. You have white nationalists supporting the Republican Party. So there's nothing I put past them. So the reality is I'm very, very concerned about, just even the discussion that's happening right now. And here in Rhode Island, so Reverend Hamilton was saying, so certain states are fortunate. We are fortunate. Here in Rhode Island, we're a blue state, and our Secretary of State, our governor, and our state legislators are already on the case. They already had put in legislation, and they're making sure that Rhode Islanders have abortion available and reproductive health services available here. So that's not going to be an issue for us, but for those communities in the South, in those red states, the people that are most adversely impacted are, guess what? Black, Latino, and Indigenous people. It's Black and Brown and Indigenous people in those states that are going to be the most adversely impacted. So, you're talking about my wife. So my wife is a neonatologist. Infant mortality rates are the highest among Black women. So, Roe versus Wade is going to have, and again, already there's an issue with Black and brown women accessing healthcare. Roe versus Wade is only going to make it harder. And the people, again, that are going to suffer the most, the mortality rate isn't going to go up. Isn't going to go down. It's only going to go up higher. And the reality is those Black and brown and indigenous people, don't have the resources to go to another state or, travel to Europe, which is something that, people that are more affluent, so middle class and wealthy families are able to do. So this is, it's going to have a huge impact across the country. And like the Reverend said, we have to be at the forefront, both at the local and state level, but also at the congressional level, calling our representatives and telling we are not going to tolerate this, because it is a very slippery slope. And again, the far right group, the far right has essentially taken over the Republican Party. Let's just acknowledge that they have taken over the GOP. So again, there is nothing that I don't put past them. The reality is, the makeup of the demographic of the U.S. is shifting, and it's shifting quicker than people realize. And so, and again, Claudia, you and I had talked about this, but 2010, the census results came out, and they saw that the demographic shift was happening faster than they had originally anticipated. In 2016, U.S., so non-Latino white women, non-Latino white people, birth rates was exceeded by non-Latino white death rates. That was the first time that they've been recording that figure that has occurred. So the numbers are decreasing. Black, Latino, and Asian numbers are increasing by 2050, and I think that's a conservative estimate, but by 2050, the majority demographic is going to be people of color, with Latinos, Black, and Asians, in that order. But that's going to be the reality here in the U.S. So everything that you're seeing right now, whether it's limiting immigration, whether it's outlawing abortion, whether it's voter suppression, or whether it's outlawing same-sex marriage, all of these things are tied together. They're all tied together. And I know, I see you nodding your head. I see it every day. All of these things, all these pieces of legislation are there to help ensure that the white majority demographic stays intact. So that's what we're dealing with right now.
So the argument is kind of being postulated as it's a pro-life versus pro-choice, but it seems to only be pro-life in utero. It doesn't seem to be pro-life after birth. No feeding, no care, no education, no shelter, no anything is associated with this process. And to talk to what you were just saying, Greg, the population, the demographics is shifting regardless of whether or not they artificially intend to do things to skew it in their favor. For as long as I can remember, the African-American population in the US is at 12%, but every other minority group is growing. The Asian population is growing, the Latino population is growing, and the white folks don't want to acknowledge the decline in their growth. When you look at early pregnancies, when you look at abortion, that is one of the population myths that's out there. It's the white folks that are being impacted by this. But putting in a pro-life agenda doesn't really work. When you look at the other things, they won't wear masks because they want pro-choice when it comes to putting a mask on in the midst of a pandemic. They don't want to protect themselves, and they surely don't want to protect you from anything that you could be exposed to. So this guise of rolling back Roe v. Wade and laying the foundation to dismantle everything, like you said, the 14th Amendment, the 15th. The only thing they haven't talked about rolling back is levying and taxation. Number 16, if they want to put that one out there, I'm going to be out there with a banner myself. You want to roll back the taxation? I'll do that. But everything else that's going to protect life and community to make citizens be equal, that seems to be a problem. We have two upcoming attorneys in the room here, Erica England. Erica, what are your thoughts about these constitutional changes, and how do you see it affecting you as a Black woman in America, you as a young woman growing up in an era where you had choices, where you had an opportunity to make decisions about your body. How do you feel about that being pulled away, that rug being pulled out from underneath you?
Well, first, I'd like to start by saying the quote, "How are the children?" In my background in Sierra Leone, we have that same saying. In Creole, it's "How di bikin din de do," which means the same thing. How are the children? And as we talk about like Roe v. Wade being pulled back, and then the fact that there are people that are voting against providing formula and aid to young children, babies, it's a contradiction. There are people that are upset that there's formula being provided to our southern border, which, you know, every presidential administration does that. But right now, because we're in a crunch, they're picking and choosing who they want to receive help, who they want to receive aid. So we're not doing well right now. As we've been having this conversation about Roe v. Wade, I'm thinking about, I think the very first time I was aware of like what abortion was, like how that ties into women's health care. And I think about the movie, I think when I was younger, I watched the movie Dirty Dancing. And that was my the first time I really remember like kind of seeing like a scenario play out. And I saw that movie so many years ago. I know that movie came out a while ago. But now here I am as an adult, and to think that we could possibly be going back to that is unconscionable. It is horrible. I've had friends growing up that I have gone to clinics with. I have two friends actually that had very scary unplanned pregnancies. I had one friend that decided to get an abortion and one friend that did not decide to get an abortion. I respected both of their rights to choose what they wanted to do, and just knew that as a friend, I needed to be there to support them in whatever decision they decided. And I don't understand why other people cannot do the same. I also am having a hard time wrapping my head around even people that are not quote unquote conservative leaning, still choosing the wrong side. In the news a lot lately, there has been a discussion around a particular race in Texas, which is a red state. In District 28, there is an anti-choice candidate that's being backed by both Jim Clyburn and Nancy Pelosi. But the opponent is a young Latina woman who is very much so pro-choice, and they're not supporting her candidacy even in this climate that we're in. And that baffles me. And I feel as though that they are on the wrong side of history with this. So I think as a young Black woman, I see the contradictions going on, not even just on the right, but within the Democratic Party as well, on the left. It was very interesting to me that Nancy Pelosi was, it was reported that she was being denied communion, and I don't see why when she is supporting an anti-choice candidate. So.
Interesting. You mentioned about the movies. I remember Dick Gregory making a statement. He said, when you watch the movies, you should watch it with the concept of what's happened is what's being presented on the screen. What is happening now that is being mirrored on the screen, or what's being planned. And I know I'm very much into technology and space and stuff. And I always used to wonder why every time there was somebody in outer space, there was no Black people. And if there were Black people in it, they were the first one to be exited off the planet or the spaceship or wherever they were. So that was a concept. And then the whole paradigm shift of what's being streaming and what's popular on Netflix, and this whole thing around the Handmaid's Tale, I couldn't understand and I couldn't get my head into it. And I had my two young nieces spending the summer with me, and they were camped out in my family room and they were watching it basically binging. And I'm like, what is so interesting about this program that makes you want to sit here and watch everything? So I decided, you know what, can't beat them, join them, sit down and watch. And I was astounded. I sat there and binged a whole season. And I'm like, these people really have lost their minds, because this is the kind of society, this dystopian view of what America should be is really what they're trying to promote. And these white men in particular are very fearful of losing their position in society that they have created or stolen from the natives and from the other Black population who've created these wealth. And rather than get along, they're just scheming for ways to create more and multiply. And so being able to roll back Roe v. Wade, I guess, is an opportunity for them to be able to multiply. I want to shift the gear a little bit and bring Gary to the conversation. Gary's a brand new high school graduate getting ready to go off to college and will be voting in his first election this year. So Gary, in terms of voting and exercising that right that you have earned, and that you are probably, when you stand in that voting booth, you're probably voting for at least 1,000 of your peers, because they won't have access to that voting booth because they've either died too early or they've been incarcerated. Can you talk a little bit about what it feels to be a young Black man raised in this society and being able to achieve and reach and have dreams that you can aspire to? Can you talk about that, how you see yourself in this construct at the moment?
Yes, I can. I'd be honored to. And again, I'd like to thank the Capstone Group for allowing me to be on here. It is so great to be working with some people I've worked with, and to be on a town hall again, especially with everything that's been going on. Again, my name is Gary Murray. I'm a senior at Paul Laurence Dunbar High School. I'm a representative on the Student Advisory Council for the DC State Board of Education. And I've also done many town halls with JMG Productions, and I can just think 2 years ago, when I was on the town hall, and for 3 weeks straight we talked about Ruth Bader Ginsburg up to her death, and the key point that would be on the panelist table would be, how do you see her seat being filled, and how do you see some decisions being impacted? And everyone talked about Roe v. Wade, and the town hall we had after Ruth Bader Ginsburg death was not only one of the most populated groups that we had, but also was one of the most sorrowful ones, because it felt as though in that moment 2 years ago, before we are even here now to the leak of the Supreme Court that has never happened ever, that we knew that it was going to happen. And so as I was sitting here on that day, when I read across my phone that the draft leak of Roe v. Wade, a draft leak out of the Supreme Court came, that never happens in history. That's like something missing from an archive at a library where you're not supposed to check out books or something. So for you to be hearing this out of the most secrecy court in the world, it's mind-boggling. It makes you think about who is the person who leaked this. But that's beyond that, you know. So what my first instinct was, I'm not going to watch any of the news platforms and media platforms, because in this day and age, you don't know what the media platforms are saying. So I went to the justices' 94-page conclusion of Roe v. Wade, and I sat there, and like I told Miss Claudette yesterday, I sat there and I read through 14 pages of this document, and all I can say is that, like Reverend Wendy said, in February, this decision's been sitting on the table. This decision they've been looking at us all like run around with our heads off like chickens, you know, worried about women losing their rights. And the whole document circulates around the right of privacy. And if you're ruling out the right of privacy, saying that right, because abortion is not a protected right in the Constitution, there's a lot of things that you can rule out. So what everybody said, I 100% agree with. And, you know, I really had to hold myself back, because this was one that really hurt me, even though I'm not a woman. I was raised by women. I have women all over my house. I have my own sister. And, you know, that really hurt me. It really felt me. And I used to live in Texas. So when they first passed their 6-week abortion law, it was like, okay, they're Republican. I kind of expected that. But then you have these other states that rule them in matters of, oh, it doesn't matter if there's rape or medical problems, medical conditions. It seems as though there's no place of thinking. That and I hate to say that coming out of the Supreme Court. And I actually got the opportunity being on the United States Senate Youth Program to talk to a judge, Mr. Judge Robert Henry, who I think is a Bush or Obama judge, but he said something that stuck with me. I'm never gonna forget. It's in my book, and we asked about it. He said that he does not believe that the courts are politicized. And I agree with him on mostly everything that he had to say. I got to ask him about African American history, voting, et cetera, et cetera. But when it came to this politicized topic, he told me this in March. I was like, I would like to believe that the courts are not politicized. I would like to believe that these judges who we watched in their confirmation hearings are going to stand with what they have to say. And boy, did Wendy open up my eyes today, because I think I've been so stuck in it nationally. I think I've been so stuck in reading this document, what they feel like their case is. And before I get on where I agree with Wendy, I want to just share some points that are in this document, because I know there's not a lot of people that may watch this, that may be on this right now, that may have read this document or may just know one point from this document. One point from this document that Justice Alito put in the document is from laws that were enacted in England in the 13th, 14th, and 15th century. That's the most mind-boggling thing I've ever read, because for us to be in the 21st century, considering laws that states that wherever passed back then during that time, why are we taking 8 steps forward and 16 steps back? And what Wendy just said that was going to resonate me, now I'm gonna have to do my research after, is the fact that DC has no legislators. I've been reading about every single state, how they're going to handle it, because basically if the Supreme Court rules Roe v. Wade is nothing, states can just go back to their original laws that they had in the Constitution, by the way, in the 1900s, that are hundreds of years old. Even Wisconsin, which is a Democratic state, they have Republican legislators, which means that that law that is amended in their Constitution from hundreds of years ago will instantly enact soon as Roe v. Wade is overturned. In a Democratic state where they majority don't want that to happen. Imagine that. So now I'm thinking about my city with no legislators, my city that has no state, my city that is majority Black and has been majority Black since 1957. They just think that we can't make our own decisions. And even if Roe v. Wade was overturned, we wouldn't be able to enact the people to make that decision. It is very important that we vote. And I'm about to get on Claudette's point. It's very important, very, very important that we vote. In the last election that Joe Biden did win, record number of people voted. 81 million people voted for Joe Biden. And more people are coming out and voting in record numbers in this primary, even though 40 plus states made voting harder. They put in laws to make voting harder, and people are still in record numbers in Georgia in their primaries going to vote. And I believe it's our generation. It's this generation. It's the young people of social media who is able to tell the misinformation from the real information. The people who are able to read and dissect this information that other people aren't going to get. And even though only 150 million people voted in last year's election, that's not even the whole almost 400 million population, they were still able to be change made. That's why voting is so dearly important. Even people that are 18, as soon as you turn 18, you should be able to make yourself aware of the knowledge, aware of what is going on nationally and locally, so that you can make decisions, vote for people that help your overall community, help yourself. I know that when I get older, And if my daughter has some type of medical complication, or somebody rapes my daughter and she cannot get an abortion, or I have to drive 500 miles to a different state to get an abortion, what are we in? What time are we in? We are in the time where people can order certain things, but have to drive miles, hundreds of miles to get an abortion.
To that point, Gary, it's not even just about an abortion. It's about access to health care, even reproductive rights, just general care. Some people may have other medical needs. The abortion is just one of the things on the menu, if I can use that term loosely, is access to care is what's being pulled. And the doctors are also being threatened. So it's not just the patient. The doctors are at risk for even treating the patient. And now they've turned the community into Gestapo. Oh, I think Sister Sue over there might be pregnant, so I'm gonna turn her in and see if I can get a reward, depending on which state that you're in, for notifying the authorities that she is in a motherly way, without understanding the background or their circumstances. Talk to me a little bit, Gary, about your peers. What are young Black men on the street doing? Are they aware of this? Do they recognize that they have a franchise that nobody can take from them? If they are over the age of 18, they can vote. And if they're younger than that, they can be a poll watcher and get paid for it. Do your peers know that? I know you are a very astute young man and you are very engaged, but what about the average guy on the corner? Tell me about that guy.
I try to keep myself as engaged as possible because I don't like to be outside of my community. I lived in Texas for my 9th grade year. And even when I was in Texas, I tried to stay as tight-knit to my DC community as possible. And one thing that I do now, whenever political news or something breaks, all of my friends know how I am. They all know that I'm face first into Politico or something, and I read a whole lot. So I often talk to people who either have deferring mindset of me that are in my age. I have friends that are conservative, that believe that they are conservative at my age, that are in Texas right now. And so I actually got the opportunity to talk to one of my friends. I don't think he would have a problem with me mentioning his name. His name is Connor. And we had a very long conversation about how do we feel mainly about the economy, about Roe v. Wade. And I can even talk about some of my peers from the United States Senate Youth Program, where if we heard somebody like Senator Chris Coons or Pete Buttigieg come on our call and mention something about the court, we have our own group chats and we would talk about it. But mainly what I'm hearing from young people that are my age, which is unfortunate, and I don't like to hear it, is that even in DC, is that they feel as though voting is not going to do anything for them. That at the end of the day, especially people in DC, because DC is not a state. DC has a population of almost 700,000. But even my own father, who had to move out of DC just so he can feel more comfortable to vote, he didn't feel comfortable to vote because he felt like DC's doesn't have that much impact on elections anyway, doesn't have that much impact in Congress anyway. So why should I vote? Why should I take my time out of my day? And young people feel and resonate the same way. And
let's talk to the audience a little bit. Anybody wants to chime in and share your thoughts around this process? Like Gary is saying, people are reluctant, they may be turned off. What are some of your thoughts? Anybody in the audience want to unmute and share with us your ideas, or is there anybody in the chat that may have something to say? Raina, can I call you out? Raina Coxum, what are your thoughts?
I actually see someone's hand up. I'm not sure, Michelle Lawyer.
Go ahead, and then we'll let Michelle be next.
Okay, I feel like, one party is very aggressive, it seems, and it makes the other party look not aggressive at all, even as it relates to, for instance, President Barack Obama had a Supreme Court pick, and I guess in 2016, about 10 months of his last term, and it was blocked. And then President Trump, he was able to appoint someone 46 days left or something like that in his term. And then when it comes to gerrymandering, just all of those things, I feel like one party seems to be very aggressive and the other party seems to be discombobulated. And so then as a result, they come for us when it's time to vote, and then they don't fulfill the promises. And so I think it's like, well, why vote?
Greg, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I have, two children who are now adults. My son is extremely well versed in politics. He comes by it honestly, but he is frustrated with the Democratic Party because one of the things you just mentioned, they say that they're going to take action on all these different fronts, and when it's time for them to actually do what they said, they always fall short. And I think there is, again, I know he's disillusioned to a certain extent, but he also realizes that if voting wasn't important, they wouldn't be trying to suppress our vote.
How about that?
So the reality is, there may not seem like there's a whole lot that we can do, but the reality is we can.
Absolutely.
And with the work that Reverend Hamilton's done, getting out there, showing, here I'm in Providence, Rhode Island. It's one of the smallest states in the country, but I have access to our congressman. I can show up at his office, whether it's Congressman Cicilline or Senator Whitehouse. I can send communications to them and let them know, hey, I see what you guys are doing. Fortunately for Rhode Island, we have great representation. So, so whether it's Senator Reid, whether it's Senator Whitehouse, Congressman Cicilline, all these people are very much engaged, and they may be a little bit, Congressman Senator Whitehouse may be a little bit older, but they are dialed into what's important to younger people and progressives in a way that a lot of other Democrats are not. And you can see in the recent elections, so you were talking about Jessica Cisneros, I'm right there with you. I'm like, why are we supporting an anti-choice candidate? I don't care, what's going on in that district. Why are we supporting an anti-choice? That's counterintuitive. And the fact that, the Democratic Party wants to shy away from progressive or liberal ideas, that makes no sense, because those are the popular ideas. They talk about progressives or populism. The things that are most important to voters right now are the things that progressives are championing. And progressives, whether they want to admit it or not, are winning races, and winning races where they've had strong backing from moderate and centrist Democrats. So I don't buy into the hype that we need to think more centrist, or that we need to be more moderate. We need to focus on those activities that are going to do the most good.
Great. Hey, Michelle, why don't you jump in here? I think you have something to say.
Yes, thank you, Claudette. I wanted to just kind of, I guess, augment a little bit what Greg is saying, and also in response to Gary. For probably the last 20 years, one of the things, because I was actually living in the district for a very long time and moved back to Maryland. But one of the things that I would say for young people especially is that even your local or, these mid-year elections are so critical. And they are even where, as for instance, you, Gary, your first voting moment. We have two young daughters who are 19. This is their first time where they're able to vote. And I told them that these even are especially more impactful on you, because many of them are local elections. And one of the things that I did very early on when moving back here was the fact that I looked at those election results And there literally were elections for your local municipalities, for delegates, for your state, the state legislature, representatives to Congress. There were actual elections that literally were lost by 2 votes.
Wow.
2 votes.
Wow.
And yeah. And so when I saw that, and we have children who are ranging from 35 to 19, and I have consistently said to them that your vote does count. Just look at that. Look at those examples. And if you don't believe me, go in the day after and look at those results. And naturally, when we're talking about, God forbid, Roe versus Wade being rolled back, and they're talking about state legislatures having the opportunity to, basically rein in or essentially jump up and down over what may have already been the rules, that your state legislator matters at this point. So again, these midterms mean so very much, and your council people. There are councils for the local municipalities as well as your counties. And that is extremely important. So when your friends, Gary, are saying that, let them know that they can see their vote count when they look at those results.
Thank you for that comment, Michelle. Joshua, who's one of our young interns, would like to speak.
Okay, so as for me, here's my whole take on it. I feel as though that this whole abortions thing, right? This Roe v. Wade thing, right? I feel as though that this is a way to target communities of color, right? Because I watched a certain clip and I noticed it was a Black doctor or whatever he was working in the medical field, and he had mentioned that when they had first started mentioning that like Roe v. Wade was gonna in the future be overturned and stuff, that it was a possibility, he noticed that because he was like maybe 1 out of 3 Black employees working at this clinic that he was in the abortion clinic, he noticed that one day he went to work and he saw many, many upper class white families driving around in trucks and stuff, going to get abortions done. And basically his take on it was that it's meant so that it can benefit the whites because they're still going to be able to get what they need done. But at the end of the day, it's not going to benefit us because we don't have the money to be able to take out that extra pay and get all the other things done as much as the whites do. And so I feel as though that this also has to deal with earlier we had Obama elected. I think that in my opinion, Obama was a good president in his own way, but I don't think that he did enough to help the Black community out, in my opinion, because I feel like for him to have been the first biracial, or as many would like to say, Black president to come into office, I feel like he had a job. And his main job was to get Black people their reparations and all the other things that they've deserved for all the other years, because of the fact that many of the other white Democrats, Republicans, or whatever they may be, have not done it for us. And the system has always been made so that whites can win. And so,
Joshua, this sounds like a whole nother conversation. Maybe it's one that we should probably take up in the fall as another topic. I don't want to rush you, but I want to give Micaiah a chance to get in here. And there are a few other people queued up and we're running short on time to close out this program. So thank you for that comment. And sorry, if there's time left, I'll give you a chance back at the mic. Micaiah, did you have something you wanted to share?
Yes, I did. Thank you, Claudette. So I just kind of wanted to touch on when you asked the question to Gary about why some of the youth feel like voting is not important. So me personally, some of you know that I go to Duke Ellington School of the Arts, and thankfully, so I take a U.S. government class, and thankfully my teacher my previous teacher, he was a Black man, and I can't count how many times I have heard him say, they don't say this in the curriculum, or they don't tell you this in your textbook. We don't even read it. We don't even read it. Like, he literally did not let us read any textbooks. We don't follow not one piece of the DC history and US government curriculum. And we had a whole voting rights segment. And if it wasn't for everything that he taught us personally, when you just flip through the pages, there would be days where he weren't there, and they would give us these little packets, the RCT packets, and they'll tell you to vote for presidential elections, but they won't say to vote for midterm elections or vote for your local or city council or vote for this person or that person. So I think one of the main reasons why young people don't vote in presidential elections specifically is because I didn't realize until he broke it down to me the way the electoral college works. And when when it was Hillary versus Trump, and I remember sitting with my dad, and I was confused because I was like, wait, I thought she got more votes than him. And then I realized, what had happened with the electoral college. But I think just we're not taught so many things that we need to know. Like, I've learned so much from this conversation, and thank you all to all of the speakers who have shared, but we're really not taught things like this in school and the importance of why we need to vote. There's a general sense of, your vote you can help control who gets into office, but it's not broken down to us the way that it was broken down into this conversation. The importance of the roles of our elected officials and how much that means to us as a city.
Thanks for sharing that, Micaiah. And in the chat right now, we're going to put up the vote.org link so people can check to see if you are still registered to vote. There's a lot of dismantling and gerrymandering going on, which means people are getting disenfranchised from the areas where they were registered to vote, or they're getting kicked off the tolls for one reason or another. So we have a link, vote.gov, which allows you to verify if you are still registered in your community to vote. Who's the next person behind Micaiah, Sonia? Was it Henry? Henry?
Yes, it was Henry. Yes.
Yeah, hi, everybody. What I wanted to say and share with everybody is that I'm part of an organization that all of you are welcome to join. It's called Black Women for Positive Change. Now, you see I'm Black, but I'm not a woman, but I was welcomed anyway. And welcome all kind of people in shades and colors. It's a multi-ethnic, multi-denominational group. They're 10 years old. They started out being called Black Women for Obama, and then they've changed and evolved. And so for 10 years, they've been doing an initiative called the Peace Week, and then it evolved to a Peace Month. Right now, our latest endeavor is what we can all be a part of. It's called Midterms Vote Matter. And we actually have a TikTok that we're going to release. We have a music behind it. And if you go to their website, I don't know if I can share my screen or allowed to share my screen. You could go to the Black Women for Positive Change website, and you could see that we have initiatives in at least 26 states. We're doing this thing called a votercade, where we're asking people to come out in their cars with voter registration cards at different events all over the country. So I urge all of you to join and check out Black Women for Positive Change. We are actually doing a lot to reach people, to register them to vote. We have congresswomen who are part of, Lucy McBath is part of our organization. The Milwaukee Congresswoman is also part of our organization. A congresswoman from Illinois is also a part of our organization. So we have a lot of traction. And so Barbara Arnwine, some of the initiatives that she's doing with Votercade is part of what we're doing. So
well, Henry, thank you for sharing that. We're going to put that up and the link. And when we edit this document to make it available online, we'll add that information as well. We had one more person before we close out. If I could ask Doreen to speak. You have the mic, and then we're going to do the wrap up for this evening's program.
Okay, cool. I'll make it short. I'm Doreen. I'm from North Carolina, so I really appreciate all these perspectives about DC and Howard. And also, I go to the best HBCU in the nation, North Carolina. No, I think this conversation.
Mute her mic. Mute her mic. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
No, I think this conversation is really interesting. And when I think sometimes about like young people, I think that we don't fully know this history, or we don't always acknowledge this history of like the struggles for Black folks to actually vote. how important it is. But then I also think like voting isn't the only tool in our arsenal. When I think about reproductive justice, I think we live in a culture of rape. We live in a culture that's very violent against women and femmes. And not just like a medical ban on our bodies, but like we have been limited. Our agency and our autonomy is limited in many ways. You know, sex education in North Carolina, it's heavily steeped in like abstinence. So when I think about reproductive justice, I'm like, you know, where do we start? But I really appreciate this conversation. This has been like soul food for me. So thank you to all the speakers.
Thank you for joining. And it seems to me like we need to continue this outreach to our community to get people engaged and in voting. So when we start the conversation about how are the children, we really have to figure out how to shift the paradigm so that we can be able to truly respond that the children are well, because that's not what we are experiencing in our various communities, and it's going to be imperative. So the challenge that we have here is to keep our voice relevant, to keep engaging our communities, to help build constituency, and to create value. Wendy, do you want to say anything before we close out in terms of what you are looking for or need, or you as somebody who's currently running for office, what is necessary to help facilitate you to the next level?
I am just so amazed by this conversation. Just thank you so much for taking the initiative to build on the conversation, on what's happening, on the information that's necessary. We have to keep having these, ladies and gentlemen. Just like everyone has said tonight, how informative this call was, how engaging this call was. We have to do this all over the country as many times as it takes, because we are part of the responsibility of the kids being all right too. We have a role to play. And this is one of the types of ways that we can fulfill that role. I want to just encourage everyone who's on this call to get involved in whatever way that you can. If even if you're not old enough to vote, and God bless the 17-year-old Joshua, I think, that was speaking, you're already using your voice. When we say be the change that you want to see, that's not just cliche. If there's something that you want to change, figure out the way in which you can change it and go do that. So maybe you can't vote, but maybe you can make a phone call. Maybe you don't like to talk on the phone, but maybe you can get on social media and start tweeting at your representatives. You know, there's so many ways in which we can get our voices into the conversation. It is more imperative than ever. Yes, I'm running for office, but again, I was down there because I felt compelled to move. This is an assault, an attempted assault on all of us, and to send us back to a place that we are not trying to go back to. You know, all of the talk around what some of the ultimate efforts are in this, even the Roe v. Wade part. Gary was talking a little bit about what he read in the draft, and I saw some excerpts from it. And one in particular was brought out that was mentioned by Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett was the goal of returning or protecting the domestic supply of infants, I think was the terminology.
Ooh. Wow, this is pretty heavy. You've given us some assignments here, Reverend Hamilton, to go and take a look. Go check the source, validate the information that we're seeing.
Please. Listen to what they're saying. They are not trying to hide it. They are letting you know what they are endeavoring to do. So all I'm encouraging everyone to do is use in the same way I'm trying to use my voice. And when I get in Capitol Hill, it will be the same. I will be raising all heaven to make sure that anything they try to do will not be done in the dark, and that they will be held accountable. So thank you for allowing me to share some of what's on the docket, what's coming down, especially for DC. We need your help as well, your voices to talk about how this is going to impact us. It will help bolster our arguments for statehood. But in the interim, friends, let's just keep talking. Don't let them think they can get away with this. They have to be held accountable by any means necessary. Whatever you have in the capacity of your life and your sort of arsenal of personal skill sets, use it. We need it. Thank you.
This has been a very interesting conversation. I wish we had more time. This is telling me that we probably need to have a part 2 in the fall, especially as we lead up to the polls. So at this point in time, I just want to share the message on the screen. If you have no record of what your forebearers' accomplishments have been, then you kind of lose the inspiration, which comes from the teachings and the learnings and the history of our people. And I'm just paraphrasing what Carter G. Woodson said. And there's one video I want to give an opportunity to close this out with. And I think some of you have seen it, but I think it is quite on point.
All right. Dang, I want to knock you. She ran out her shoe.
Go to Leia. Go Lele. Go Lele.
Let's go, Lele. Good job, Lele.
Let's go Lele. Let's go Lele. Let's go Lele. Let's go Lele. Lele. Let's go to Leia. Come on, mama. Let's go to Leia. Let's go to Leia. Let's go to Leia. Let's go to Leia.
She ran out her shoe and had it.
Let's go.
She lost her shoe and had it.
She came from behind, failing to start the race with her footwear on, to turn around, get her footwear, get back in the race and win it. That's how we've been challenged as a community. That's how we're challenged as a people. So we got to stay in the race, be prepared to go the distance and to win it. I want to thank everybody who's been on the panel and those who've joined us this evening. Thank you for your time, because I know you could have done a lot of things on your Monday evening, but this was really special. Thanks again for your participation.
Well, that's it for our event. We hope you've enjoyed it. If you'd like to become a member of the Capstone Group or make a donation to our scholarship fund, click on the link below. Take good care and enjoy.